Much of the literature on Asantewaa is concerned with her role in the last war against the British in the 1900s. There are endless and seemingly inconclusive discussions of what her role was exactly in that conflict. Did she plan, inspire, lead or direct the uprising? Was she merely a symbolic figure of resistance? Did Asantewaa fight in person, or did she oversee operations? What were her precise movements when the struggle was clearly lost and she was hiding from the British troops? Did she surrender voluntarily, or was she betrayed? And if so, was it by a friend or foe? Did the British exile her to die in Seychelles in 1921 as a figurehead or engineer of the last attempt to overthrow their rule? It was the turn of the new century, 1900s. A new governor had been appointed for the British-controlled Gold Coast, Sir Frederick Hodgson. One of his first official duties as governor, he and his wife set out from Accra, the seat of colonial power, to Kumasi. His wife, the Lady Hodgson, would later recall this day in her memoir, A Siege of Kumasi, with foreboding words, describing it as an ill-fated day. The journey, set to commence on March 13, was shadowed by the ominous superstition surrounding the number 13, marking it from the start as a venture destined for misfortune. Their arrival in Kumasi coincided with the Yam Festival, a time the first harvest of yams were ceremonially offered to the local priests. On March 29, 1900, a Grand Durbar was convened in Kumasi, bringing together chiefs and influential leaders from across Asantewaa. It was during this gathering that Asantewaa first emerged as a formidable figure in the eyes of the British, setting the stage for her legacy as a fierce leader and a symbol of resistance. At the Durbar, the governor in his address informed the gathering that for their own benefit, it was crucial they accept the Queen of England as the paramount authority over their land. He further announced that Prempeh I, who had been exiled to Seychelles Islands, would not be returning. From that moment, he claimed that power traditionally held by the Asantehene would be vested solely in the Queen. The governor then made a startling demand. He asked for the golden stool. Now, accounts vary as to his intentions. Some say he requested it to sit upon, a symbolic gesture of British dominance. Others claimed he sought its delivery to England, as the Queen was now the ultimate power in the land. Once the governor had finished his address, the customary handshaking began. The Queens, accompanied by their chiefs, filed past and shook hands with the governor. There was a noticeable shift when it came time for Asantewaa to pass by the governor. She stopped in front of him, stretching forth her hand, examining the clothes he was wearing, and informed his interpreter to tell him that she admired his uniform. She insisted on approaching the governor's wife to shake her hand, marking the first act of her resistance, and she wouldn't take no for an answer. In doing so, she stained the governor's wife's gloves. In response to the governor's demand for the golden stool, a secret meeting was convened in Kumasi among the remaining members of the Asante government. As the council deliberated, a fierce disagreement erupted over how best to confront this growing threat. Asantewaa, enraged, stood and said, "How can a proud and brave people like the Asante sit back and look while the white men took away their king and chiefs and humiliated them with a demand for the golden stool? If you, the chiefs of Asante, are going to behave like cowards and not fight, you should exchange your loincloths for my undergarments." Asantewaa seized the gun and fired a shot in front of the men, indicating her readiness to go to war to defend the stew. She took on the leadership of the Asante uprising in the 1900s, gaining the support of some of the Asante nobility. From March 28 to the late September 1900, the Asante and the British were engaged in what became known as the War of the Golden Stew. While the Anglo-Asante War of 1900 and 1901 is widely known as the Asantewaa War, the role played by the Queen Mother in conflict is controversial. In many oral histories of the war, Asantewaa's role was inspiring the resistance. Historian Edu Boahen asserts Asantewaa did not fight. She stayed in Edriso as the overall leader and commander-in-chief of the Asante forces. In the accounts where she led the armies of Asanteman, Asantewaa laid siege to the British fort, which was in Kumasi, where the governor had sought refuge in the rebel uprising. After several months, the Gold Coast governor eventually sent a force of 1,400 men to quell the rebellion. Reinforced from all their colonies all over Africa, the British's large and well-equipped army was sent to capture Asantewaa. Asantewaa would fight and retreat again and again with her ever-diminishing band of supporters until more than a year later, Asantewaa and 15 of her closest advisors were captured, and they too were sent into exile to Seychelles Island, where she died. This rebellion represented the final war in the Anglo-Asante series of wars that lasted throughout the 19th century. On January 1st, 1902, the British were finally able to accomplish what the Asante army had denied them for almost a century, and the Asante Empire was made a protectorate of the British Crown. Asantewaa died in exile on October 17, 1921. 3 years after her death, on December 27, 1924, Prempeh I and the other remaining members of the exiled Asante court were allowed to return to Asanteman. Prempeh I made sure that the remains of Asantewaa and the other exiled Asantes were returned for a proper royal burial.